There are moments in every leader's life that don't go the way they predicted. This show is about speaking through those moments. I'm Margaret Watts-Romney, and this is Speakership in the Time of Change, the communication podcast for established leaders who are done leaving their most important moments to chance. Welcome to this episode of Speakership in the Time of Change. In our very first episode, we broke down the word speakership, what it means, where it came from, what it looks like in the wild, and how you can find your own. Today, I want to show you what I see and what I'm looking for when I'm talking with people about how they speak, how they show up in times of change. It all started when I left my planned talking points behind and followed my gut. So it's July of 2020, with all of its unease and uncertainty around hand sanitizers, face masks, being outside, and what to wear on a Zoom call. I was living in Colorado with my daughter, and we decided that online college would be better from my house than her 400 square foot apartment. 2 years later, we would question that decision, but we were all making decisions in that moment based on guesses about what would happen next. My own work had also been upended since most of my clients and my work had been around helping clients and teams to speak with confidence and prepare talks to give. As we know, in 2020, all of those events and opportunities went away. With one team in particular, we had started talking back in February about some training that they wanted, about delivery techniques, about how to stand on a stage with confidence and what do I do with my hands and what if I pace or not. We wanted to talk about that specific physical, embodied way of being on a stage. But of course, here we were in July rethinking everything. How do we work on this when we're all on a screen? What do we do to practice being embodied on a stage? What else is possible if we're not in person? But when the engagement finally started and we were together in the Zoom room, all on our screens, things were so different that I actually threw out a different question. What is it that you do need right now? What are you looking for? What would be the most helpful to you? And the room is quiet, and they stop and think, and their eyes look up and to the side as they're wondering and thinking about their own speaking and what would be most helpful. And one of them pipes up, "You know, what I really need is a way to move forward when there's pivots and surprises. I'm just so thrown. You know, when I'm in a meeting and the agenda gets bent backwards on itself, and all of a sudden we're talking about a subject I had no idea we were going to get into." I paused and my breath caught in my chest, and I was silent for a minute because I knew right then I didn't have an answer. I knew how to prepare, but they were asking about the moment in time when you need to change right now from the plan you had. How do you speak in times of change? But I was excited by the question. I could see that if I had some kind of an answer, if I had a framework or a tool that you could keep in your back pocket somehow to pull out in those times of unknown, it would be really exciting. It could be really powerful. Not only when a meeting or agenda goes sideways, but for those times in our personal life to make change too. What are the principles of communication in times of change? I wasn't sure if there was an answer, but I really wanted to try to find one. So I went into my research mode and I sat on my couch with all of my favorite books and an open laptop to search articles. I put on my headphones and my hoodie like I do when I'm deep in thought. And I searched. I took notes. I tried to find through lines. I wrote down catchphrases and keywords, but I couldn't see it. So I took a break and I went back to the structure that I know, the structure that had led me to guide so many other entrepreneurs and leaders and speakers and humans, the structure of story. I'm fascinated by story theory, and I could talk about it much longer than I should, and I actually did. Freitag's pyramid, 3 zones: the people, the context, the setting. Karen Eber: context, conflict, and outcome. But instead, let's look at an actual story, one of my favorites, the Pixar classic WALL-E. It's okay if you don't remember it or if you haven't seen it. The opening scenes show us a desolate world of mountains of garbage with one lonely robot plus his cockroach friend on his daily activity of moving garbage from chaotic heaps into pyramid-like structures. Okay, look closer, break it down, and simplify. What do we have? We have a character or two in a place doing a thing. Stop. End of lesson. That's it. That's all it takes to grab our attention. That's all it takes to start a story. A character in a setting doing something. Now, the smart storytellers at Disney know we won't stay seated for very long if we just watch a robot smashing garbage into cubes. So pretty soon we see that there's a problem. We see that this robot wants something. Over and over, he watches a clip of an old musical where 2 people gently hold hands. He wants to hold someone's hand. Now we have another part of the story. We have a desired future state. We have a somewhere over the rainbow moment, or a I want to be a Jedi Knight like my father moment. And we want him to. We want him to be able to hold someone's hand. We have no idea how he will make this happen on his empty planet. Bing! There you have it. Those are the fundamental elements of a story. First, start with a character and a setting in action. I call this the now. Then there's a desired future state. I call this the new. And third, there's an unknown path to get there. And I call this the unknown. When I was working with people preparing the things they were going to say, sometimes stories were small. It was literally an anecdote that somebody told about their dog or about that one time. Sometimes we used the story arc structurally across an entire presentation. What's the beginning state of the audience, and what do we want to move them to? Even the driest presentations from security engineers reporting to the board on their progress had an arc. So when I was sitting on the couch with all of the books around me and all of the notes and pages of research around me, I thought, could we simplify? What if I go back to story? If story can be as small as a 6-word anecdote, for sale, wedding ring, never worn, or if a story can be as epic as across an entire speech, is it also robust enough for us to turn to in moments of chaos? And that word chaos was the clue. Chaos, unknown, transition. That is the middle of a story. What if finding our way through moments of change means naming where we are in the story? Here's an example of what I'm talking about. Imagine there's a man standing in a hallway in an apartment complex, holding a large bag of groceries with vegetables and flowers spilling out of the top. He's holding his keys and he's stumbling with them, trying to get into the apartment very quickly. We see him go into the dining room, light a candle, place the flowers in a vase, set the table with the sparkly silverware. We watch as a cat follows him from room to room, sniffing whatever he's doing, in anticipation that something exciting is going to happen. The man goes into the kitchen, he's chopping a salad, he starts a red sauce on the stove, he looks at the clock anxiously. In the hallway, we hear footsteps of a woman coming towards the door. She's holding a briefcase and she looks tired. Back in the kitchen, we see that the cat has now jumped onto the counter next to the stove. And in the excitement of the front door opening with its favorite owner coming home, the cat steps on the handle of the pot, spilling the warming red sauce all over the floor and landing splat in it. The man quickly picks up the cat out of the mess and looks up to see the woman's face. She is aghast and in horror as she sees her partner holding a knife in one hand and in the other a cat covered in red. Do you see the two stories here? There's the story the man was in of preparing a nice dinner, of getting home early, of doing what he could to prepare for her coming home. And her story, when she walked in, seeing a scene of destruction and murder. So we make up stories all of the time to make sense of our world. Our brain is constantly scanning to answer the question about ourselves, our relationships, and our context. And we make projections about what's going to happen next, about what is the new world we're heading towards, and if it's one that we want to be in. I have a theory that if we're aware of what scene, of what story we're creating for ourselves and others, that can help us make change in a direction we want to go. Because if one of these elements is shaky or in danger or not working well, that can slow down the whole story. I'll show you what I mean. I was talking with a leader that I'll call David. David is somebody when he walked into a room, people's shoulders relaxed and their eyes lit up. When he stood in front of a room and talked, it wasn't with a booming voice or charismatic gestures, but he spoke about things in a way that made you take a breath in and out and relax your shoulders a bit. He built trust around him wherever he went. In his previous job, before I knew him, he was really smart. He knew a lot of stuff. You could kind of say he was a rocket scientist. He wasn't, but you could say that. He had been the one in the room with the answers, with the expertise, with the technical knowledge so specific that people turned to him to learn it. People brought him into meetings to make their so-called rockets go. But now he was in a new arena, a new industry, and he didn't have all the answers. We were talking and working together because the leadership around him saw how people on the team loved working with him, how they breathed a little easier and their shoulders relaxed when they worked with him. They also saw when this guy was in a room of other experts, he tended to shut down. He got quiet. He stopped meeting people's eyes. He held back. He held back in times they knew he had something to offer, even if it wasn't all of the perfect answers for how to make their rockets go. So he and I talked and worked together about those speakership moments when he was in rooms that made him nervous. What was going on? What were the stories in his head? What was he noticing? And what we found was the element of the story that was the weak link was his story of himself. How he held a story that if he wasn't the rocket scientist with all of the smartest, best, most specific technical answers, he shouldn't be in the room. He had gone through a change. He wasn't in rooms where they needed his expertise about rockets, but his old story of himself was still there. He thought he needed it to be the one type of main character in the story, but actually he needed to be another. He could be helpful to these people, even if it wasn't in the specific answers they were looking for. He brought a listening ear, he brought trust, he brought perseverance, and a commitment to helping them figure out their most intricate questions and problems. And we changed his story of himself. That being a partner and a guide and a listening ear in a room was enough. So, turning back to 2020 and the team I was with, where we were shifting from delivery techniques into answering questions about how to respond to pivots and surprises. Let's just call it. They had thrown me a surprise. But the world changed between February of 2020, when we started planning this workshop on stage presence, and July of 2020, when we had a conversation about what they really needed. I was up against what to say in a moment of change that had been sparked by a year of change in the world. I didn't have to answer his question or choose new materials. I could have kept with my original slides, but I chose to slow down and take a closer look at what they needed. So after all of my hours on the couch, with the books, trying to find a through line, trying to find an answer. The next time we gathered, I asked them for more details about their scenarios. What did it look like in those meetings when they got a surprise, when the agenda was taken off course? When had they successfully navigated a pivot? What did they want it to look like? And then I shared my idea. When we're in the middle of a change, whether from a left field plot twist or wanting to change how we show up with others, our brains are looking for information. Where are we now and where are we going? The specific answers to this, of course, will look different in every scene, every conversation and project. But when all of our brains together feel like we are understood, like we're standing in the same world, where we see where we are, and we see together the future we want to happen, together we can write the scene for what happens next and how we speak up in moments of change. This is what we'll keep exploring in our next episodes, speaking with leaders about their times of change, mapping tools that worked for them to clarify those stories with others, and connecting it back to the shared patterns in our human minds. Next time, tune in to hear the surprising thing an Olympic gold medal coach looks for to see if someone is growth ready. If this episode gave you something useful, follow us, share, and leave a review. It helps us support leaders everywhere. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.